In the cold expanse of space, far from the peaceful homeworlds of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, the small planet of Tylora teetered on the edge of annihilation. Its alien inhabitants, peaceful and gentle beings, had lived in harmony for millennia, never dreaming that the stars themselves would one day become their greatest enemy. But now, as the skies darkened and the once silent world shook with the violent thunder of invaders, Tylora's time of peace was coming to an end. Tylora was a beautiful planet, covered with vast forests, endless oceans, and sprawling meadows. Its people, the Tylorans, had lived here in quiet harmony, far from the conflicts that consumed other worlds. They valued life, peace, and community above all else. Their homes were woven seamlessly into nature, and their society was built on the belief that all life was sacred. They knew little of war or violence, and even less about the dangers lurking in the far reaches of space. But now, everything was changing. A fleet of warships, led by a ruthless alien race known as the Zarkoth, descended upon Tylora with terrifying speed. The Zarkoth were a conqueror species, known across the galaxy for their brutal tactics and their insatiable hunger for resources. They had invaded countless planets before, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. Their objective was clear: strip the planet of its resources, enslave or eliminate its inhabitants, and move on to the next world. The Tylorans had no weapons to fight back, no defense against the advanced technology of the Zarkoth. Their peaceful planet had no military, no warships, and no soldiers. The Tylorans were scientists, philosophers, and farmers. They were not built for battle. And now, they found themselves at the mercy of a species that cared nothing for their way of life. The Zarkoth began their invasion with brutal efficiency. Ships descended from the sky, raining destruction down on the cities below. The Tylorans scattered, fleeing into the forests and mountains, searching for safety. But there was nowhere to hide from the relentless assault. Tylora's once lush lands were scared by explosions, the air filled with the acrid scent of burning forests and shattered stone. In their panic, the Tylorans did the only thing they could think of. They turned to their oldest technology, a forgotten communication system deep beneath the surface of their planet. It had not been used in centuries, but it was still functional. And so, with trembling hands, the Tylorans activated the ancient system, sending out a desperate plea to the stars. It was a message of desperation, a cry for help that echoed across the galaxy. To any who may hear this message, the transmission began, crackling with static. This is the planet Tylora. We are under attack. Our people are helpless. We are in need of aid, from any and all who can offer it. Please, we beg you, help us. The message was brief, but it carried the weight of a civilization in peril. As it traveled through the vastness of space, reaching distant star systems, the Tylorans could only pray that someone, anyone, would respond. The plea for help was sent out with no expectation of a response. The Tylorans were a peaceful species, unknown to most of the galaxy. They had no allies, no powerful friends who could come to their aid. They had lived quietly for generations, isolated from the conflicts of the greater universe. But the galaxy was vast, and they held on to one faint hope: that somewhere out there, someone would hear their call. As the hours passed, the invaders showed no sign of relenting. The Zarkoth troops continued to sweep across Tylora, taking what they wanted, destroying what they didn't. Their warships hovered above the planet, casting long shadows over the cities below. The Tylorans watched helplessly from their hiding places, praying for the impossible, an intervention that might save them. But the hours turned to days, and no help came. The distress signal was heard by many, but most simply ignored it. After all, why risk a conflict for a species that had no military, no power, no value? The galaxy was full of war, and many thought that this was just another futile struggle between weaklings and conquerors. Tylora's cries were lost in the noise of 1,000 other battles. But then, something unexpected happened. As the days passed and hope began to fade, A new signal came through. This one stronger, clearer, and full of power. It wasn't a plea for help. No, this message was different. It was a promise. To the Tylorans, the voice began. We have heard your call. We are the Deathworlders, and we do not turn away from those in need. Help is on its way. The message was brief, but it was enough. The Deathworlders were coming, and for the first time since the invasion began, the Tylorans dared to believe that they might be saved. Who were these Deathworlders? No one knew. Their name alone inspired fear across the galaxy. Deathworlders were known for their ruthless survival instincts, their strength, and their combat prowess. They came from the most dangerous planets in the galaxy, where life itself was a constant battle. They were not peaceful, like the Tylorans, nor were they soft and kind. They were warriors, and when they said they would help, there was no question about it. The Tylorans could only wait, hearts pounding, as the Deathworlders made their way to the planet. What would happen next? Would they save Tylora? Or would the galaxy's most fearsome species turn out to be as merciless as the invaders? The answer was coming, and with it, the fate of Tylora hung in the balance. The tension on Tylora was palpable. The once peaceful planet, now scared by the destruction of the Zarkoth invasion, lay in waiting, unsure of what would come next. The Tylorans had seen their homes burned, their cities shattered, and their loved ones taken. But now a spark of hope flickered in the midst of the dark chaos. The Deathworlders were on their way. But as the days stretched on, the question lingered. Who were these Deathworlders? Were they truly coming to help, or had the Tylorans simply invoked the wrath of yet another dangerous species? The Tylorans were no strangers to fear, but the idea of Deathworlders coming to their rescue was a mixed blessing. Their name alone filled many with dread. Deathworlders hailed from planets where survival was a daily struggle, where the very environment could kill you in moments. These beings had evolved in the harshest conditions imaginable: raging storms, venomous creatures, and deadly terrain. They had survived it all. To them, the concept of danger was foreign. They were the living embodiment of strength, and they had the power to shape the fate of any world they set their sights on. Yet, as the Tylorans huddled together in their underground shelters, awaiting news, a strange sense of anticipation filled the air. For the first time, they weren't alone. Someone, no, something, was coming to fight for them. Deep in the core of their underground city, an elder named Tessa stood near the communications center. She had lived long enough to know that nothing came for free in this galaxy. She had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and she knew that this offer of help could come with a price. But what choice did they have? The Zarkoth were ruthless. Without help, Tylora would fall. Suddenly, a low hum filled the room. The old communication systems, which had been dormant for so long, buzzed to life. Tessa's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a regular signal. It was a confirmation. "Prepare yourselves," came a crackling voice over the speaker. "The Deathworlders have arrived." The Tylorans rushed to the surface, climbing through the destroyed streets and battered buildings. Their once beautiful planet was now a war zone, but the arrival of the Deathworlders brought a new sense of purpose. They had to witness this moment. Their saviors were here. And then they saw them. The Deathworlders' ships were enormous, massive, black hulks that seemed to block out the sun as they descended from the sky. The ships were unlike anything the Tylorans had ever seen before. Their design was jagged and rough, as if they had been forged in the fires of a distant, hostile world. There were no smooth curves, no artistic flourishes. The ships were weapons, and they looked like they had been built for one purpose only: to conquer and survive. As the ships landed, the ground trembled beneath the Tylorans' feet. The sheer weight of the Deathworlders' arrival was enough to shake the earth. The Tylorans stared in awe as the massive ships opened, revealing the warriors within. The Deathworlders were not like any species the Tylorans had encountered before. They were tall, their bodies covered in thick, dark armor that gleamed in the light of Tylora's twin suns. They moved with a purpose, their eyes cold and calculating, their every motion a testament to their military precision. These beings were not peaceful like the Xylorans. They were predators, and they carried an aura of danger that made the Xylorans uneasy. But there was no time for hesitation. The Deathworlders had come, and they had a mission to fulfill. They moved swiftly, their weapons in hand, and they began to take control of the battlefield. Their presence alone was enough to send a ripple of fear through the Zarkoth forces. The Zarkoth, who had been relentless in their invasion, paused as they saw the Deathworlders approach. These were no ordinary warriors. The Deathworlders were not here to negotiate. They were here to end this war, and they would stop at nothing to see it through. From the Xyloran hideout, Tessa watched the battle unfold. She saw the Deathworlders engage with the Zarkoth in ways she never thought possible. They moved with a speed and brutality that made the Zarkoth appear like clumsy insects in comparison. Their weapons were unlike anything that Xylorans had ever seen. Blades that cut through the toughest armor, guns that fired with deadly precision, and explosives that shattered the Zarkoth's defenses like paper. The Deathworlders were like a storm, unstoppable, relentless, and unforgiving. The Zarkoth never stood a chance. Tessa felt a sense of awe and fear. The Deathworlders had come, just as they promised. But what did they want in return? The Xylorans had never known violence. They had never known what it meant to fight for survival. But now, their lives were intertwined with these warriors from the Deathworlds. The battle raged on, and the Zarkoth forces began to retreat. Their morale shattered by the ferocity of the Deathworlders' assault. The invaders had no choice but to abandon the planet. The Xylorans watched, trembling, as the Deathworlders continued their pursuit. It was clear that the battle was far from over, but for the first time in days, the Xylorans had hope. But as the skies cleared and the sounds of war faded, one question remained. What did the Deathworlders want in exchange for their help? Would they leave, as they had come, or was there a price to pay for their salvation? The fate of Xylora and its people was far from certain. The smoke still lingered in the air, thick and acrid, as the last of the Zarkoth forces retreated across the war-torn planet. Xylora, though scared, was alive. The Deathworlders had fulfilled their promise, driving the invaders back. The remaining Zarkoth ships flowed into the atmosphere, leaving behind only their shattered remnants. The battle was over, but a new, more complex chapter had begun for the Xylorans. Tessa, still standing on the edge of the battlefield, watched as the Deathworlders moved through the wreckage, securing the area. The Xylorans had not seen warriors like this before, so efficient, so methodical. The Deathworlders didn't seem to care for the destruction they had caused. To them, it was simply the cost of war. But to the Xylorans, this was a world they had once cherished, now reduced to ruins. Their home was safe, yes, but at what cost? As the days passed, the people of Xylora gathered in the central square. The news had spread fast. The Deathworlders had saved them. Yet there was a sense of unease that lingered in the air. The Xylorans owed these creatures a debt, one they could not yet understand. They had witnessed the power of the Deathworlders firsthand, and it was clear that the favor of these warriors came with an unspoken price. Tessa, once a leader of her people, now found herself standing in front of a council of elders. The heavy silence in the room was only broken by the faint hum of the old communication systems. Every elder knew what had to be done, but none were ready to face it. They had asked the Deathworlders for help, and the cost was yet to be revealed. "Do you think they will leave now?" one of the elders asked, his voice quiet, almost fearful. Tessa shook her head. "They are not like us. They don't fight for free. You saw the way they moved, the way they fought. They are used to paying for everything they do, and they expect to be paid too." Another elder, her face wrinkled with age, spoke up. "But what do they want? What could we possibly offer them in exchange for saving our world?" That was the question no one had an answer to. The Deathworlders had shown up at the perfect moment, and they had done what they promised. But there was no indication that they planned to leave quietly. The Tylorans had no idea what they were dealing with or how to repay this debt. Tessa glanced out the window, her eyes settling on the towering figure of the lead Deathworlder, a being called Kairos. He stood in the distance, overseeing the cleanup of the battlefield. His armor gleamed under the light of Silora's twin suns, and his posture was unwavering. He radiated an aura of quiet power, as if he didn't even have to lift a finger to command respect. The Tylorans, for all their wisdom, could not fathom the true nature of these warriors. A sharp knock on the door brought Tessa out of her thoughts. The door opened, revealing a soldier, one of the Deathworlders, standing at attention. "Elder Tessa," the soldier said, his voice gruff. "Kairos requests your presence. He wishes to speak with you." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Tessa nodded, signaling that she would go. As she left the council chamber, she could feel the weight of the unknown bearing down on her. What did Kairos want? And more importantly, what would the Deathworlders demand? The journey to meet Kairos was short but tense. The streets of Xylora were filled with people who had once been afraid, but now they watched in awe as the Deathworlders moved through the city. Their stoic faces and purposeful strides gave off an air of invulnerability. Tessa couldn't help but wonder how much longer this uneasy peace would last. Finally, she arrived at the meeting place, an open plaza at the heart of the city. The Deathworlders had established a base there, setting up an encampment with advanced equipment. Standing near the entrance of the camp, Kairos awaited her, his tall figure casting a long shadow. Tessa approached, her heart racing. She had seen him lead his warriors in battle, but now she was face to face with him, and the intensity of his gaze was overwhelming. "You came," Kairos said, his voice deep and steady. "I trust the planet is secure." Tessa nodded, trying to steady herself. "Yes, your warriors were more than effective. We are safe for now." Kairos studied her, his expression unreadable. "For now. But the Zarkoth will return. They always do. You will need more than luck to survive the next time they strike." Tessa felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had feared this. The Deathworlders didn't speak in vague terms. They were direct, and their words were always calculated. "There's something else, isn't there?" she asked, her voice steady despite her growing unease. Kairos stepped closer, his towering figure looming over her. "You've asked for our help, Idlora, and we've given it. But nothing in this galaxy is free. Our people have fought, bled, and sacrificed to get where we are today. We don't fight for nothing. You will owe us, Elder." Tessa swallowed hard. "What do you want?" Kairos' eyes narrowed. "You will find out soon enough. We have a purpose here, and you will play your part in it. All I ask is that you honor your debt when the time comes." With that, Kairos turned and walked away, leaving Tessa standing in the plaza, her mind racing with unanswered questions. What kind of debt had she just accepted? And what would the Deathworlders demand in return? The true cost of protection had only just begun. Days passed, but the questions remained, gnawing at Tessa's thoughts like a persistent whisper in the back of her mind. The Tyloran people had been saved, yes, but the nature of their salvation had begun to take a darker turn. The Deathworlders had not left, and despite their outward calm, the people of Xylora couldn't shake the feeling that something far more ominous was brewing. The Deathworlders had set up permanent bases in the key cities, quietly establishing their presence across the planet. Their advanced technology began to alter the landscape, and while many were grateful for the protection, some questioned the long-term consequences. It felt as though they were preparing for something. But what? Tessa met with the council again, this time with a heavy heart. She had done everything she could to reassure the people, but the unease was palpable. There were whispers in the streets, questions about the price of protection, about what the Deathworlders wanted. Was it their technology, their way of life, or something else entirely? Should we trust them? One elder asked, her voice cracking with worry. They are not like us. They think differently. They live differently. Tessa sighed, feeling the weight of her responsibility. I don't know. I can't even begin to understand them. But I know one thing. They didn't come here just to help. They expect something. And sooner or later, we will have to pay that price. What if we refuse? Another elder questioned, his eyes narrowed with concern. What if their price is too high? Tessa stared at the table in front of her, unable to answer. She had no idea what the Deathworlders would ask for, but she knew that, if they truly wanted something, refusing them was not an option. These were not beings who would be turned away. Across the city, in the heart of the Deathworlder encampment, Kairos stood over a map, his sharp eyes scanning the terrain of Xylora. His warriors were spread thin, keeping watch over the planet's most vulnerable locations. The Zarkoth had been repelled, but the Deathworlders knew that the enemy wouldn't be gone for long. There was always the next threat. The sound of footsteps approaching broke his concentration, and without looking up, he spoke. You've come. Tessa stepped into the dimly lit command center, her mind still racing with uncertainty. Yes, I needed answers. The council, the people, they are beginning to ask too many questions. Kairos turned to face her, his eyes cold, but there was a glimmer of understanding behind them. They are right to question. It is not in your nature to trust us. She took a step closer, her voice steady, but filled with an edge of frustration. What do you want, Kairos? What is the price? You have saved us, but we cannot remain in your debt forever. What is it that you seek? Kairos studied her for a long moment before responding. You seek answers. You want to know what we want. But you will understand in time. Your people will be a part of something much larger than you can comprehend. Tessa felt a shiver run down her spine. The way he spoke made it sound as though they were already tied to something far greater than just a simple exchange of protection. There was an underlying message in his words, one she couldn't yet grasp. You are not just protecting us, she said softly, more to herself than to him. You are preparing us for something. Kairos did not deny it. Instead, he stepped forward, his presence towering over her. In time, you will see. The Zarkoth are only one of many threats, and while you have fought valiantly, there are forces beyond your reach, forces that no one can withstand alone. Is that why you're here? Tessa asked, her voice thick with suspicion. To prepare us for your war. Kairos' lips curled slightly, almost imperceptibly. To prepare you for the war that is already here. You just haven't seen it yet, but you will. And when you do, you'll understand why the debt is necessary. Tessa was silent, the weight of his words sinking deep into her. She had wanted to know the price. Now she feared that she understood, but it was too late to back out. The Kylorans were entangled in something far larger than their own survival. You can't know what you're asking, Tessa finally whispered, her gaze dropping to the floor. We are a peaceful people. We have no experience in war. Kairos placed a hand on her shoulder, a firm gesture that held no malice, only cold certainty. You will learn, or you will fall. With that, he turned away, leaving Tessa standing in the darkness of the command center, her heart heavy with the realization that the Kylorans were now bound to the Deathworlders in ways they could never have imagined, and the price for their protection was only beginning to unfold. Outside, the planet seemed peaceful once again. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the city, but beneath that calm surface, an undercurrent of tension rippled through the air. Tessa could feel it, could sense that something was coming, something far more dangerous than they could ever have anticipated. The true cost of their survival was yet to be revealed, and when it came, it would change everything. Days turned into weeks, and the city of Xylora, though still standing, was no longer the peaceful sanctuary it once was. The once tranquil streets now echoed with the heavy steps of Deathworlder soldiers, and the hum of their advanced technology was a constant reminder of the price that Psi-Lorans had agreed to pay. Tessa could feel the weight of it all, an invisible burden pressing down on her, one that only grew heavier with each passing day. The Deathworlders had brought their vast power to the planet, and with it, they had instilled a sense of duty, not just to protect the Psi-Lorans, but to prepare them for the coming darkness. It was clear now, this wasn't a temporary alliance. This was a shift in the balance of the galaxy. The people of Xylora were trying their best to adjust. Training programs were being established, designed to teach the Psi-Lorans how to use the weapons and technologies the Deathworlders had provided. But despite their efforts, there was a deep undercurrent of unease that refused to dissipate. Fear lingered in the air, unspoken but always present. Tessa found herself once again at the council chamber, staring at the faces of her fellow leaders. Some were uneasy, others angry, but most were resigned to their fate. The question of the Deathworlders' true intentions hung over every discussion, unspoken but felt by all. "We've given up too much already," one of the elders said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and frustration. "What's next? What do they want from us?" Tessa bit her lip, trying to find the right words. "We don't know yet, but we've already seen the consequences of refusing them. And I fear the day will come when we are forced to make a choice we might not want to make." Her words hung in the air like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over the room. No one spoke for a long time, but the tension was palpable. Each person in the room could feel it, the weight of the decision that was slowly but surely being thrust upon them. Their alliance with the Deathworlders was no longer just a matter of survival. It was becoming a matter of survival at any cost. Across the city, Kairos stood once more in the heart of the Deathworlder encampment, watching as his soldiers conducted drills. They moved with precision, their every action a testament to their ruthless training. They had come to protect Xylora, yes, but in doing so, they had transformed the planet into something else entirely, something that no longer resembled the peaceful world it had once been. Kairos was a man of few words, but his presence commanded respect. He watched the Psi-Loran recruits struggle with the alien weapons, his eyes cold and calculating. They weren't ready, but they didn't have time to waste. He knew the Zarkoth would return, and when they did, the Psi-Lorans would have to be ready. There was no room for failure. But there was another, more pressing matter that weighed heavily on his mind. The message he had received, encrypted in secret, had sent a ripple of unease through him. The galaxy was about to change in ways no one could anticipate. The Zarkoth were only one threat. There were others, more dangerous, and they were coming. He needed more than just warriors. He needed allies, but not just any allies. He needed warriors who understood the cost of survival, warriors who were willing to sacrifice everything to ensure the galaxy's survival. And he had a feeling that the Psi-Lorans, with their newfound strength and training, might just be the key to facing what was coming. Kairos glanced over his shoulder as one of his lieutenants approached, his expression tense. "The Council has sent another request for aid," the lieutenant said. "They're asking for more training, more weapons." Kairos nodded. "Give them what they need, but don't expect them to be ready. The storm is coming faster than we can prepare." The lieutenant hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "And what about the Zarkoth? Should we send a message?" Kairos shook his head, his jaw tight with the weight of his responsibility. "Not yet. We need to be certain of what we're facing. The Psi-Lorans have no idea what's coming for them, and we need to be prepared for the worst." Back in the heart of Xylora, Tessa couldn't shake the feeling that the end was drawing near. She had hoped that time would reveal more of the Deathworlders' true intentions, but the days were growing shorter, and the questions were multiplying faster than answers could be found. Her people were being pushed to their limits, and she knew it wouldn't be long before the inevitable clash would occur. In her dreams, she saw flashes of the galaxy's dark future. She saw the Deathworlders standing tall, leading the charge against something far more terrifying than the Zarkoth. But she also saw Xylora, broken and bleeding, caught in the middle of a war they never asked for, a war that was about to become their reality. The storm was coming, and no one knew if they would survive it. Tessa stood alone on a balcony overlooking the city, her mind heavy with the weight of her decisions. The galaxy was about to change, and Xylora, despite its newfound strength, was not prepared for what awaited them. The first whispers of war had begun, and soon the entire galaxy would feel its tremors. The tension in Xylora's capital city had reached a breaking point. With each passing day, the streets grew quieter, the people more fearful. The Deathworlder soldiers had entrenched themselves further into the city, their presence impossible to ignore. Though they had promised protection, the very sight of them was a stark reminder of the price Xylora had paid for their safety. Tessa couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. The Deathworlders were not here merely as guardians. They were preparing for something. And though their methods were efficient, their actions were unspoken. Each movement was calculated, each decision shrouded in secrecy. It was as if they knew something that Xylorans didn't, something even Kairos refused to share. She had tried to get answers. Late nights in the council chambers, hours spent searching through encrypted messages and reports, but everything seemed to lead to a dead end. The Deathworlders were allies, but they were not friends. They didn't share everything. And that made Tessa more nervous than she was willing to admit. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders themselves were no less troubled. Kairos, a warrior who had seen more wars than anyone should ever witness, stood before his battle-hardened soldiers. His eyes were unyielding, his thoughts focused. The Zarkoth were coming, and there was no turning back now. The Deathworlders had done their job. Xylora was as ready as it would ever be, but they would need more. They would need allies, and they would need to act quickly. "We cannot waste any more time," Kairos said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "The Xylorans may be ready for battle, but they are not ready for what is coming. The Zarkoth are only one piece of a much larger puzzle, and the pieces are falling into place faster than we can move." The soldiers in the room nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Their eyes glinted with the quiet confidence of warriors who had been in the crucible of battle before. But even they knew this would be unlike any fight they had ever faced. "Where do we go from here?" a young officer asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "We've done everything we can to prepare them." "We need more," Kairos replied firmly. "More firepower, more resources, more allies. Xylora cannot stand alone in this. The galaxy is shifting, and if we don't act, we risk everything." Tessa, oblivious to the conversations happening just beyond her reach, walked through the corridors of the council building, her thoughts clouded. The moment she had feared had finally arrived. The galaxy was on the brink of war, and her people, though prepared in some ways, were not yet ready for the battle ahead. Her hand gripped the edge of the balcony railing as she gazed out over the city. The stars above seemed so far away, but they were closer than they appeared. War was on the horizon, and Xylora was caught in the middle of it. She had no illusions. Surviving would require sacrifices, but the true cost of victory was still a mystery. As the sun began to set over the city, the sky slowly turned a shade of orange that seemed too vibrant to be real. The calm before the storm. Tessa had always known that alliances forged in desperation were often the hardest to trust. The Deathworlders had their own motives, their own reasons for being here. But even so, she couldn't ignore the truth. They were the only thing standing between Xylora and total destruction. And in the face of what was coming, there was no choice but to trust them. On the outskirts of the city, a small group of Deathworlder scouts stood silently, watching the horizon with narrowed eyes. The reports had come in. The Zarkoth were close, very close, and they were not alone. The Xylorans' fragile peace was about to be shattered. The universe was a harsh and unforgiving place, and now, Xylora's defenses were being tested in ways no one could have imagined. Kairos stood among the scouts, his expression unreadable. He could feel the weight of the moment. They were ready, but not yet prepared. The odds were against them. The Deathworlders, even with their military might, were stretched thin. There were too many threats converging on this small corner of the galaxy, and time was running out. "We cannot afford to fail," Kairos said quietly, his voice low but resolute. "We are the only hope these people have. If we cannot protect them, then all of this, all of it, will have been for nothing." The scout leader turned toward him, his face grim. "And if we fail?" Kairos' eyes narrowed. "Then we fight until we can fight no more." The darkness of the horizon grew thicker, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. In the far distance, the unmistakable silhouette of the Zarkoth fleet appeared on the edge of the stars. The storm was coming, and this time there would be no turning back. Back in the heart of the city, Tessa knew the final decision was upon her. She had to act now. The future of Xylora, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested in her hands. The council would meet again the following day. The time for hesitation had passed. The question now wasn't whether or not they would fight. It was whether or not they could win. The day had come. The skies above Xylora were dark, not from clouds, but from the sheer presence of the Zarkoth fleet. The alien armada hung in the atmosphere like an overwhelming shadow, blotting out the stars. Xylora, once a peaceful world, now found itself caught in the snare of an impending apocalypse. Tessa stood at the heart of the city, her heart pounding as the weight of responsibility pressed down on her. She had seen the reports, heard the warnings, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of this moment. The Zarkoth were here, and they were ready for war. No longer was it a matter of negotiating peace. It was survival. The Deathworlders had taken their positions, not just as protectors, but as warriors in a battle for the very survival of Xylora. Kairos, the leader of the Deathworlders, had given them a simple order: hold the line at all costs. No one was certain what would come next, but they all knew the stakes were higher than ever before. Tessa met with Kairos in a small war room beneath the capital. The room was dimly lit, filled with the quiet hum of communication devices and the clicking of the tactical map as it updated in real time. The Zarkoth had begun their assault. Trench lines had been drawn, and the first wave of defenders was already out on the front lines, preparing for what could be the most violent conflict in Xylora's history. "Tessa," Kairos greeted her, his voice grave but steady. "We don't have much time. The Zarkoth are advancing faster than we expected. Our defenses are ready, but their numbers." His sentence trailed off, and Tessa could see the wariness in his eyes. "We can't afford to lose," Tessa replied, her voice firm despite the fear churning within her. "Not now, not when we've come this far." Kairos looked out over the tactical map, his face stone cold. "We won't lose. Not if we stand together. But you must understand, this isn't just a battle for Xylora. It's a battle for all the peaceful species across the galaxy. If we fail, others will fall." The gravity of his words hung in the air. It was true. Xylora's survival was only the beginning. If they could hold, if they could survive this onslaught, it would send a message to the entire galaxy. The Deathworlders were not just warriors, they were protectors. And when the call went out, they would answer. The room fell silent, save for the steady beeping of the monitors and the soft murmur of communication channels. Suddenly, an urgent report blared across the intercom. "Incoming wave. The Zarkoth are launching their main assault." Tessa's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly steadied herself. "We've prepared for this moment. The Deathworlders are ready. We can't hesitate. We fight now, or we fall." Kairos turned toward her, a rare, grim smile crossing his face. "Exactly. Get to the front lines. The time for speeches is over." Tessa nodded, then turned and made her way out of the room. The air in the capital was thick with tension, every citizen aware of what was about to unfold. The streets were lined with the brave defenders, standing shoulder to shoulder with the alien warriors who had come from far and wide to fight for their survival. As Tessa made her way through the city, her thoughts raced. Was she truly prepared for what lay ahead? The answer came quickly. There was no choice but to be. She had seen the way the Deathworlders fought. Relentless, brutal, unyielding. And she had seen the way that Psi-Lorans stood beside them, despite their fear. If they could do that, then so could she. The battle erupted with a deafening roar as the first wave of Zarkoth forces landed on the planet's surface. The Deathworlders were already in motion, charging forward with a ferocity that left the Zarkoth reeling. Every soldier, every warrior, knew that there was no turning back. The ground shook beneath Tessa's feet as she sprinted to her position, the sound of explosions and gunfire ringing in her ears. The Deathworlders were leading the charge, cutting through the Zarkoth ranks like a hot knife through butter. Their tactics were savage, effective, and above all, surprising. They used the terrain to their advantage, striking from unexpected angles and using their superior physical strength to overwhelm the enemy. Tessa found herself alongside Kairos, watching as he and his warriors fought with a precision and brutality that was nothing short of awe-inspiring. The Zarkoth, though fierce, were no match for the sheer determination of the Deathworlders. Their weapons, their strength, and their ruthlessness made them the ultimate force in the galaxy. But even with their strength, the battle was far from over. The Zarkoth were relentless, and their numbers seemed endless. It was clear that this would be a long, hard fight. Tessa clenched her weapon, her pulse quickening as she joined the fray. Her mind raced with the knowledge that this battle would decide the fate of countless worlds. She had no illusions about the outcome, but she knew one thing for certain. She would fight to the end. As the battle raged on, the Deathworlders stood tall, their resolve unshaken. Tessa and Kairos fought side by side, their actions in perfect harmony. Every move, every strike, was a testament to their commitment to the cause. And in that moment, Tessa understood something that had eluded her before. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something much greater, the will to protect, to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. The Zarkoth were powerful, but they had underestimated the strength of the Deathworlders. And now, as the battle reached its climax, the tide began to turn. The Deathworlders were not just warriors. They were the guardians of the galaxy, and they had proven that when a call came, they would always rise. The Zarkoth would fall, Psi-Lora would survive, and the galaxy would witness the true power of humanity's greatest allies, the Deathworlders.